Hi, my name is Karun Mann, and today I will talk about teaching human rights. Here's the outline. I will provide a brief introduction of the topic, followed by curriculum connections. Then I will discuss major lesson plan components. After this, I will describe activity based teaching and then provide examples and talk about formative and summative assessments. And lastly, I will touch upon cross curricular connections. As you know, that human rights are the basic rights and freedoms that belong to every person in the world from birth until death. So, question comes in mind, why teaching human rights is important? Well, to adopt a whole school approach to equality and human rights, because without a culture of fairness as a whole, learning about these topics can at best appear irrelevant and at worst hypocritical. So, teaching human rights help in creating a safe place for students to explore, discuss, challenge, and form their opinions and values. Talking further about the benefits of teaching human rights in schools, this can prepare students to take active steps to identify and address issues of discrimination where there is evidence of prejudice, harassment, or victimization, lack of understanding, disadvantage, or lack of participation for individuals with protected characteristics, disability, gender, race, pregnancy, sexual orientation. To summarize, basically to teach respect and tolerance to students to help them to create a healthier, happier, and a fairer school culture, and to empower students with learning that they can use far beyond the classroom. In fact, they will take it out into school corridors and playground, to their homes, beyond to their wider community, and of course to reduce bullying and other negative behaviors. Now, for curriculum connections, there are many, but for today's lesson, it is outcome Power and Authority 6.3, which says to explore examples and explain how people, such as ethnic minority groups, the disabled youth, and the elderly, may be affected by injustices or abuses of power. Other outcomes may be IN 1.1, DR 1.1, IN 5.2, and this list is long. A possible essential question that can go along this topic, for example, can be, how has Canada evolved into a democratic society which respects human rights? Students will be able to know new words like misuse, power, law, minority, disabled, elderly. Additionally, they should be able to understand that misuses of power exist everywhere and minority groups are often the most affected. They will understand that there are laws that exist to protect minority groups and prevent abuse of power, but there are still inconsistencies in these laws. Learning from this lesson will enable students to describe incidents of the misuse of power in groups and to research laws that specifically affect young people, minority groups, the disabled, and the elderly to determine the disposition of governments towards the status of these groups. Further, they should be able to evaluate the reasons for the effectiveness of such laws and to propose changes needed in human behavior and institutions in order to prevent the abuse of power. For broad areas of learning and cross curricular competencies, the topic will help students to become engaged citizens and develop social responsibility as they become informed and responsible members of communities. Now, talking about the activity based teaching strategy, the strategy or idea of active learning is based on the premise that students learn best when they are actively involved in the teaching learning process rather than just sitting and listening to the lesson. Its core principles is learning should be based on doing some hands on experiments, discussions, and practical activities related to the topic. Therefore, in this teaching method, students are involved in learning activities more than listening, and less emphasis is placed on transmitting information and more on developing student skill. So that the students take control of their learning and are involved in higher order thinking such as analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Presenting some examples of activity based teaching and learning, this is the tree of human rights, which you can do with very less material, and this can be very much of a pre diagnostic assessment, or you may use in later lessons. For this activity, ask students in small groups to draw a tree on a large chart paper. Write on the tree in the forms of leaves, fruits, flowers, or branches those human rights that they think all people need to live in dignity and justice. Ask students to think about what human rights tree needs to grow and flourish, which they should write in section of fruits, for example, a healthy economy, education, rule of law, etc. When their drawings are complete, students present their tree and explain its components. You may extend the activity like matching the fruits, leaves, and branches with articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and write the number of the article next to each item, or display these trees in the classrooms or public places or school corridors, or identify rights that are of particular concern to you or your community. For second example, again, you do not need big supplies. Ask students to produce a creative expression of an article of UDHR. This activity can be modified to make the resulting creations into a guessing game, a community presentation, or a celebration for December 10, which is Human Rights Day. Students can also create posters to serve as reminders for creating human rights environment. Here is an example of one that I have created as a guessing game. Ask students to select an article of choice from UDHR. They may choose any rights enjoyed, denied, or defended, or all of the three. They will then create a sketch or mime, poem, flag, graph, but their product should not reveal the number of illustrated article. Students will now share their creation and other students will guess the article. The team which identifies the correct article reads it aloud. You may also provide points to the team to encourage participation. For the extension of activity, again, you may choose to display the products in school library or ask students to present their products in front of school, parents, community members, or Human Rights Day, or else make posters for public awareness and display in community places. A good point about this strategy is that it provides scope of differentiating the product and make adaptations for accommodating diverse learning styles and needs to fit the students who need different levels of academic challenge or those with exceptionalities. During the activity, you can observe, assist, talk to, or involve students in discussion when they display their work to gauge their learning. For summative assessment, students can prepare a visual presentation in which they select a historical or contemporary issue of their choice where human rights have been violated in Canada. They should briefly describe the issue, which human rights were violated, who suffered, what were the consequences, and if any relief was provided or justice was served. But don't forget to provide rubrics and examples like for historical issues, they may include Japanese Canadian internment, Chinese attacks, or incidents like Komagara Meru or mistreatment of indigenous communities. Some examples of contemporary issues can be like the one displayed, for example, Toronto restaurant violated Muslim men's human rights or violation of indigenous people's rights. So finally, for cross-curricular connections, this topic fits well with health, arts, and ELA. Thank you all for listening and please post your feedback.